Right, so we are back for lesson 29. Now, a little thing about lesson 29 is if we were in school, I actually probably would have skipped it because you guys are so good at this, but we have the time, boys and girls, so we might as well do it, right? All right, so this is 4th grade, module 5, lesson 29. We get to estimate the sum or difference to the nearest half or whole number by rounding. Explain your estimate. Well, you know how I feel about explaining it using a number line. We don't need to do that, do we? I mean, we can, but... So let's get right to the problem set. Number 1, well, it's 1A, is 2 1/12 plus 1 7/8. Now, if I'm going to pretend this whole number doesn't exist for just a minute. If I'm thinking about 1/12, and I break this into 12 parts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and I color in one of them, is that going to be close to 0 or is that going to be close to 1? So we know that that is closest to 0. So that means that whole number is going to stay the same. So this rounds to 2. Now 1 7/8. Now let's look at this fraction part for a minute. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nope. 7, 8. All right, and we color in 7 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So is that closest to 0 or 1 whole? It's closest to 1 whole. So that means this guy, instead of staying at 1, goes up to 2. Remember rounding? Yeah, we gotta remember that again. So we're really saying 2 plus 2 is 4. So 2 1/12 plus 1 7/8 is about 4. And look, I did explain it with my pictures here. I would prefer the tape diagram as opposed to the number line, but it's up to you. You could always do a number line. And I forgot an eraser. Hold on, I'm getting tissue. Okay. So that would be A. So let's move on to B. We have 1 11/12 plus 5 3/4. So 1 is going to be closest to, or 1 11/12 is going to be closest to what? So if you need to, I bet you already know this, but if you need to draw a tape diagram for 12s, of course they have to be 12s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11/12 is all of this. So it's going to be closest to 1 whole. So that's really closest to 1 whole. 1 plus 1 is 2. So 1 11/12 means you have this whole one and 11/12. So that's really close to 2 whole. 5 3/4. So let's take our 3/4 here. Well, actually, well, yeah. Here's our 3/4. 1, 2, 3. So is that closest to 0 or 1? It's closer to 1. So we pretend that that's a 1. So what's 5 plus 1 is 6. So 2 plus 6 is 8, which means 1 11/12 plus 5 3/4 is approximately 8. So you think of that as 2 and think of that as 6. So that would be B. Don't forget to add in your whole number though, okay? C is 8 7/8 minus 2 1/9. Okay, 8 7/8. 7/8 is going to be really close to 1 whole. So we think of it as 1 whole. So it's 8 plus 1, 9. 2 1/9. Well, 1/9, we haven't done 1/9 yet, but 1/9 is going to be here. We cut the rest of that into, if we have that into 9 parts. So that's really close to 0. So that 2 1/9 is actually closest to 2. Right? See what I'm saying? So the answer would be 7. D, we have 6 1/8 minus 2 1/12. Okay, so 6 1/8. What do you think 1/8? 1/8, you're only shading in 1 out of 8 whole, so that's going to be closest to that 0. So that means that 6 stays the same. So 6 1/8 is closest to 6. 2 1/12, well, if you break something into 12 parts and you're only shading in 1, you're not really close to 1 whole, so that 2 also stays the same. So remember, this is like 1 whole, 2 whole. If I were to actually cut this correctly, it would look like that. So see how that's closest to 2 whole? And 6 1/8, well, I don't have enough room to draw 6 of them here, but still closest to 6. Oops, I forgot to answer that. So 6 minus 2 is 4. Now we have 3 3/8 plus 5 1/9. All right, let's do a different tactic. Let's draw all of this. Let's draw 3 whole first. 1, 2, 3. And then we need 3/8 from the next one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is 3 whole. And 1, 2, 3. That's 3 3/8. And now 5 1/9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we still have to do 1/9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh my. Of course, I choose the one with lots of drawing to show you this way. I bought new markers because I left all of my markers at school. Isn't that great? Whoops. Okay. So this is actually kind of close to 3.5, right? But is it going to be closer to our 0 or our 1 if we're just doing whole numbers? And yes, it's going to be closer to 0. So that means 3 whole. Now, which one's this closest to? 5 or 6? Well, you only color in 1/9 down here, so this is closest to 5. So 3 plus 5 is 8. So approximately, this would be 8. We could have said that this is closest to 3.5, because when we draw that, we can see that. And this is closest to 5. So you could give me the answer of 8.5, and I would accept that. All right, so this page 2 of the problem set starts with number 2. It's very strange talking to myself, boys and girls. I really do miss our conversations. Estimate each sum or difference to the nearest half or whole number by rounding. Explain your estimate using words or a number line. So we have 16/5 plus 11/4. Now there are so many different ways you can do this. There really are. It might be easiest if you change these to whole numbers. So these are improper fractions, and we can change it to a mixed number, I should say. And then do the same thing we just did on the beginning of the problem set. But I'll teach you something else too, because we remember that this signifies that it's a fraction, but we also know that it kind of means like divided by, remember? So I'll show you something with that in a minute. So here we can change this to a mixed number. Now remember, there are 2 ways of doing it. You can do 5/5 and then 5/5, so that's 10 so far, and then 5/5, 5, 10, 15. That means I'm left with 1/5, and that's 1, 2, 3, so that's 3 1/5. But remember, you can also go off to the side and do your division. So you get 3 subtract, you get 1, 3 and 1/5. Remember, we had just learned that way too. So you could do either way. And then let's do the same. We have 4/4, 4, 8, no, 12 is too much. So 4 and 4 is 8, 9, 10, 11. So that means we have 2 and 3/4. Okay, but remember you can go 4 into 11, 2 times 4 is 8, subtract, you're left with 3, 3/4. So there's a little refresher for you. So 3 1/5 is closest to, so if you figured out 1/5 is going to be closer to your 0, so you are left with 3, 2 3/4. What is that closest to? 2? No. Try again. 3. There you go. 3. So we have approximately 6. Now, I'll show you that in a different way too. It's kind of the cheater method. I'll start it all over again though. But it requires you to kind of really think about it, so it doesn't work for everyone. But a lot of you have noticed patterns when we do things, so I'll show you anyway. I want you to skip count by whatever your denominator is, okay? So 5, 10, 15. 15 is really close to 16, right? This is kind of like more of a check. I wouldn't actually do your work this way. So how many times does 5 go into 15? 3, right? And you only had 1 left over. So this is kind of the way, you know how I said that mentally you can be able to switch it from an improper fraction to a mixed number? It's kind of that thought. You know that 5 goes into 15 3 times and you're only left with 1. So you have, so you know that basically that's going to be closest to 3. Now 11 goes into 4 how many times? 4, 8. So you're just training your brain to be able to switch that improper fraction to a mixed number. 4, 8, 12. Well, 12 is too high. So if you think of this closest to 8, you can just kind of do it in your head. And some of you were able to do that before. And then you can say, oh, okay, that's closest to 3. So if you can do it in your head, okay, but, you know, make sure you learn the proper way too. All right, B, we have 17/3 minus 15/7. So let's change this to a mixed number. I'm going to go off to the side on this one, and I'm going to say 3 goes into 17. 5 times 3 is 15. Subtract, I have 2/3. So that's 5 2/3. 2/3, let's look at 2/3 here. Is that going to be closer to 0 or 1? It's going to be closer to 1. So this kind of looks like 1 whole. So 5 wholes plus 1 whole would be 6 whole. Now let's do 7 into 15. 7, 14, so that's 2. And I subtract, and I have 1/7. Now 1/7, that's pretty close to 0. So 2 and 1/7 is going to be closest to, oh, I put the arrow the wrong way. 2 and 1/7 is going to be closest to 2. So we subtract and we get about 4. Now C, I like C. We have 59/10 plus 26/10. In my head, I'm thinking 59 is really close to 60. So if I skip count 10, 20, 30, 40, 60, that's about 6 times. And here, 26 is close to 30. So if I skip count by 10, 10, 20, 30, that was 3 times. So maybe this answer is going to be about 4. So let's figure it out. All right, let's go off to our side. 10 goes into 59. 5 times. 5 times 10 is 50. I subtract, I get 9/10. So this is 5 and 9/10. Remember, you can pull out 10/10 5 times, that's fine. And then I'll go over here. 10 goes into 26 twice. We multiply, subtract, and 6/10. So if I put 2 and 6/10 on a number line, or if I showed the 6/10, it's going to be closer to 1. Nope. Here's 6/10, right? So it's closer to 1. So instead of, so this set 6/10, I almost look at it as a 1 whole. So 2 plus 1 is 3. Oh, whoops, I forgot to write this, sorry. 2 and 6/10. So 5 and 9/10 is definitely closer to 6. 2 and 6/10 is closest to 3. And did I get my original estimate right? Yes, I did. So it's approximately 9. Now, number 3 is an interesting one, and I would actually like you to comment maybe on our classroom page what you think the answer is, because I don't want to do it for you right now. Montoya's estimate for 8 5/8 minus 2 1/3 was 7. Julio's estimate was 6 1/2. Whose estimate do you think is closer to the actual difference? Explain. I would really like to see what you think of that, because I figured it out a couple different ways. So I'm interested to know how you got your answer. So we're going to skip down to number 4. It says use benchmark numbers or mental math to estimate the sum or difference. Well, here, all our mental math people, when you look at a fraction, you know, is it closer to this number or this number? This is where you can really shine. We have 14 3/4 plus 29 11/12. So 14 3/4 is going to be closest to 15. How do I know? 3/4 is closer to 1 than it is 0. So you basically do 14 plus 1 is 15. 29 11/12 is really close to 30, because this is basically closest to 1, and 29 plus 1 is 30. So we have 45. B, 3 5/12. Ooh, that's a tricky one. Plus 54 5/8. Now, this is an interesting one, because I know that 5/12 is really close to 6/12, and 6/12 is 1/2. So instead of doing only whole numbers, what if we do half for this one? So we can say this is 3 1/2. Whoops. And 54 5/8. Well, isn't that close to 4/8, which is 1/2? So what if we do 54 1/2? If we add them up, make sure I have the numbers right. 54 and 53 gives me 57, but what's 1/2 plus 1/2? That's 1 whole. So we're adding 3 wholes plus 54 wholes plus 1 whole. So we have 55, 6, 58. Now, could you have said that 3 5/12 is closest to 3 and 54 5/8 is closest to 55? Yes, you could have. And look, I get the same answer actually. But both of these were close to that half mark. That's why I decided to leave half, because half and half, when we add half plus half, we get a whole. All right, we've got 2 left, boys and girls. We have 17 4/5 minus 8 and 7/12. Remember, we're subtracting now, so be careful with your signs. 17 and 4/5, that's really close to 18, isn't it? Because this 4/5 is close to 1, 17 and 1. 8 and 7/12. Oh, 7/12 is really close to 6/12. So it's really close to 8.5. And you know what? I'm going to say 8.5 because I want the most accurate answer I can get. So how do I subtract this? How do I take this away? Well, we can do our little tricky, this is 17 and this is 2/2. Look how fancy I'm getting right now. And then we can do 17 minus 8. What's 17 minus 8? That's 9. And 2/2 minus 1/2 is 1/2. That's fancy pants. I hope that's the right answer. I could always check it. Add my wholes. 9 plus 8 is 17, and half is 1 whole, so that's 18. So, could you have said that this was 18 and this was 9 and get an answer of 9? Yes, that would have been fine. If you had said that this is 9 and this is 18. Either one would be right. All right, and then D, our last one, we have 65 eighths minus 37/6. Now, I know some of you in my class right now are thinking those numbers look really close to some numbers. Which numbers are they? Well, skip count by eighths right now. 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, 48, 56. What's next? 64. 64 is really close to 65, isn't it? What's 64 divided by 8? 8. Skip count by sixes. 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36. Oh. What's 36 divided by 6? 6. And look at that. Start noticing those. You know that 8 times 8 is 64, and if 65 is really close, then you can approximate it that way, That's how you can use your mental math strategies. So that's the end of lesson 29. I hope you enjoyed it. This is kind of a freebie because we didn't even really have to do this one. But stay tuned for tomorrow's lesson 30.